Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. My name is Seth Crusman, joined here once again with Ben Brayshaw and Dan Mickelin. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good. I think we got a nice show lined up, so yeah, things are good.
We do have a good show lined up today. We're talking about risk, reward, and retirement. And on top of that, we've got some Social Security, Jim Cramer, and hydrogen baked into this one for you today. It's going to be some fun. Hey, if you are new to Money on Tap, we welcome you. And if you are joining us in the podcast venue, please subscribe. And if you subscribe, then just send us a little note saying, hey, I popped up here and subscribe to your show. We've got something for you. You can send that to info@yourmoneyontap.com or reach out to it 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We just appreciate the connection there and love to send you some gear. For those of you that have been picking up some Money on Tap gear or sending us some feedback or questions or, show ideas, we love it. It's a fun thing for us to do here. We get to engage with you. And if you're spending some time with us today, we just appreciate you. You can be doing all sorts of things with your time today. You're here with us. We want to make it valuable to you. With that, we're going to dive right into Money in the News.
And first up, coming to us from CNBC, as Republican contenders start to line up for the White House in 2024, Social Security may be a key issue. And I feel like it's always a key issue, but, as we've long discussed on the show and the kind of impending insolvency there coming up in 2034, where at that point, basically the Social Security fund will have available dollars to pay only about 80% of the present benefit level. It's just becoming more and more of an issue as we're kind of moving closer and closer to that date. And, with each inflation increase and different budgetary issues, that date, in fact, is sliding closer and closer even as we stand here today. But the biggest issue out there it comes down to the simple economics of it. Our government, can either raise taxes to fund this or potentially push out the retirement age. But these are two means of solving it that every candidate or most of the candidates out there seem to be extremely hesitant to do. And both political parties know that that's, essentially a sure way to not get elected. Just kind of continue to kick the can down the road without really offering much of a viable opportunity here. But this article actually goes on to suggest something that I thought was fairly interesting. It's a program being suggested and run upon by a semi-local politician, or he was here for a while. Laffey was formerly the mayor in Cranston, Rhode Island, and his kind of claim to fame was at the time he was elected mayor, they had the worst bond rating in the country. And he was able to raise that from a B to an A- in a couple of years of kind of real fiscal belt tightening and improving their ability to pay claims against funds that they've raised. So he's got a little bit of background in managing his way through somewhat of a financial crisis. And the program he suggests, I think it's got some merit.
Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting conversation. I mean, we've had every conversation around Social Security I think is imaginable about the concept of it just terminating in sometime in 2030s. It's funny, this article talks about Social Security running out of money in 2034 and only paying about 80%, of each dollar to its beneficiaries. I've seen 2032 and 70 cents on the dollar. So no one really knows where this thing's going to go. And the fact is that so many people are retiring. The weight of dragging down these assets is just growing substantially. And the other piece about this that's why doesn't anyone know exactly when we're going to run out of money? Well, two things is we don't know how much payroll tax is going to be paid in. If we're going to go into a recession, that's one thing. the Fed's raising rates and the inflation rates and all of that stuff, depending on what kind of Social Security increase you give each year, all these variables start adding complexity to when we're going to run out of money and how much you're actually going to be able to pay, because that creates lots of variables. And Kotlikoff, who is a professor at BU, he's an economics professor, came up with this concept of basically paying only 10% of anywhere from 14 to 15% of the whole FICA tax range, whatever that was, into your own personal retirement account. So the employer and the employee would do this. This would be in exchange for your future Social Security, separate from any other retirement plan you have, which would be invested in some sort of fixed return investment. They're saying somewhere in the 6% range, I think was the 6.2 was the conservative number, right, Dan?
Yeah, so we call it the personal security system, and each employee would pay 10% of their wages into this program. So it is a privatization of Social Security, and they would invest, as proposed. I mean, obviously this is all theoretical, in a portfolio of equities and bonds, global stocks as well. So, it would be, I guess, considered a diversified investment, with the expectation that over long periods of time that this will outperform what you would get in a Social Security benefit.
And then based on how much you make depends on how much the government then contributes.
Right. So, if you're a low income earner, if you're disabled, there's a couple different categories where there would be, essentially the equivalent of an employer 401k match, right? So the government itself would fund in some of these dollars to get you to whatever the kind of bare minimum level is they expect for a contribution.
This article is really good for a lot of our listeners, just from a standpoint of understanding that Social Security is going to have some major impacts over the next 5 to 10 years. We're going to see, probably some major upheaval, because eventually the can can't be kicked down the road anymore. And people vote their minds because now everyone understands they have to vote their mind. Like, it's always the, last minute decision because that's what we had to do scenario here. I think this is not the first time that privatizing Social Security in any capacity has ever happened. I mean, it's been presented by a lot of people, but this Laffey gentleman is using this as part of his platform for running for president.
Yeah, this is his primary issue. It's the number one thing on his agenda.
And he's utilized this, and it's going to be part of his launching pad. Interesting per se. That they're doing this. I mean, George Bush did this. It's been presented a few different times. Even Obama wanted to privatize some of the retirement plans. People have talked about this, and I think a lot of people have issues with their money going to the federal government to be invested. But I think we don't realize that Social Security is already doing that.
It's unfortunate it's actually already too late, because clearly the numbers are what they are. It's running out, and it's running out soon. Any change like this is a future concept for a future retirement that potentially comes into play, but it isn't a solve for the Social Security problem that we have today. And the problem here is clearly not necessarily that there isn't a viable solution. It's that we have politicians in the way of actually executing or actually being willing to put aside their reelections or whatever they feel is at their best interest, in the interest of us, the people that have been using these systems, and they don't have to.
Yeah, people vote their pocketbook. I mean, that's kind of a standard, and unfortunately, when you start vote, I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said, when you start voting in your own well-being, that's when democracy breaks down. You vote in your own well-being, and that's been kind of a problem in the recent past and the current present, and we need people that will say, this is what's the best financially for our country. This is what's the best for us to move forward to meet our obligations. These are all the responsible decisions that need to be made that no one's willing to make. And, sometimes you put your job on the line to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, that much more likely scenario the article points to, that would be, what our present stable of politicians would potentially pass into law, things like, pushing out the retirement age by a few months here or there, and making, slight increases on the amount of your income that can be taxed for Social Security purposes. Those are good for a well-funded program if you're forward-looking and trying to enrich the benefit. But given the state of the real issue we have, and to the point that we talk about all the time, this massive influx of new retirees, that slight turn of the dial isn't going to fix it.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this is that we need people to work. We have a declining population of people doing jobs, and it's hard. And, I mean, if you're fortunate enough to retire, like in the on time, that's the thing about our culture. We've created this on time, like you're going to retire in your 60s. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really look forward to just stop doing stuff. I mean, that's not really the focus. I mean, people do other things in retirement. All we do is help people retire. So, I mean, I understand what retirement's about, but, there are plenty of things out there to still be done post 60, and our need for it is growing daily.
Jim Cramer names his Magnificent Seven stocks that are the real deal. Julie Coleman, thank you, CNBC. Basically, it's the rehash of FanMag, right? It's a lot of the same players that have pushed the market north for the last 15 years at least. That's been the S&P 500's kind of story, right? Is that there's these 5 to 7 stocks that are really the weight of the S&P 500 that are pushing the numbers that are the north or south, whichever direction they're going. As of today, we now have Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Amazon, Meta, Tesla, and Alphabet. Any of those sound familiar? Yeah, we've gone down this road a couple of times before, right? Jim's saying, got to stick with it. There's no fighting this one, guys. We're going down this road, so might as well jump in the ship, because if you want to have something going on that's, not a bond in your portfolio, this is the way you got to go.
I think it's interesting looking at this this portfolio. I own a few of these, and most of our clients own most of them. The problem with this, and I'm just thinking about one of our portfolios, guys, where we actually just sold Apple in the mid 170 range. It's like these are great companies and they're innovative, and his points are well made. But there's a point in time where some stocks they've risen and they've kind of, accomplished your goal. And then there's other opportunities out there to take advantage of. When everyone's chasing one thing, it means something else is being overlooked. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people miss. And I think one thing that we focus on is looking for companies that are oversold, that are high value, profitable, and so forth, that are competitors even to some of these in different ways. But I do agree with him. It's like if you're going to buy Apple, like I bought Apple for my my son's my account. I'm never going to sell Apple. The kid's 15 years old. If he listens to this, he'll know he has an account that he doesn't even know exists. But I have no need to sell it. It's just like Apple will probably be $500 a share one day, and he'll be 50 years old and say, wow, I can't believe my dad bought this for me. It split 6 times, and whatever that story is fine. But for somebody who's trying to create value today, Apple is a low yielding asset that is only value to you in your pocket if you pretty much sell the stock at some point.
I'd agree that in these names, if you're going to try and put together a quick portfolio and hold it for the next 20 years, I mean, you basically can't lose. My only issue with the article is that, and it states it right here, in the year-to-date returns, Apple's up 37%, and this is as of June 1st. Microsoft, 38%. NVIDIA, 159%. Amazon, 44%. Meta, up 120%. Tesla, up 66%. Alphabet, up 39%. I don't know that this is the exact buying window, considering where all of these have already performed so far this year. To look for a little bit of a dip and kind of find the right entry point on each of these, and ultimately take some time to amass a portfolio that includes all of these things. I think that's sound, and that's great, and that's a long-term, forward-looking, probably going to be a good outcome for you. But diving whole hog into these stocks today, given what they've already done this year, seems like you're really buying off the peak.
Well, someone said to me, they're like, I can't believe you guys sold Apple. Like, that's the one holding that no matter what it does, good, bad, or indifferent, no one can get mad at you for. Like nobody's going to judge you for the fact that you held Apple and it lost 20%. And I said, it doesn't bother me because, well, the conversation went, well, you think you're just going to buy it lower? And I said, no, I might buy it higher again. They said, really? I said, yeah, but I could go out and buy something else, make money on it, and probably come back and buy Apple near where it's at, the 175 to 180 range. Like, I could probably get into it again at where it is, because it's up 37% year to date. I'm like, I could probably get this buying rate some other time and still be making money with my money somewhere else.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you took out the name and I just said, hey, we're up 37% in this and 38% in that, 159% in this other, would you ask me, is it a good time to maybe take some profits or sell?
We're not even halfway through the year.
No, it's okay. It's okay to take some money off the board from time to time. I just think it's, hey, it's Jim Cramer, guys. Come on. So anyways, we got a little bit of time, basically about enough time to say hydrogen and then move on with the rest of the show. But we're not going to do that to you. Basically, the topic here is that the Biden administration sees hydrogen as, I'm going to put on the voice for you. The Biden administration sees hydrogen as a game-changing climate technology. The reality is far more complicated. All right, that's the headline. And Ella Nielsen is bringing this to us from Yahoo News. Thank you. Basically, it's right now. I feel like I'm reading a fifth grader's report on clean energy, and basically putting all of their eggs in one basket of hydrogen and saying this is the game changer for the future, folks, and everybody needs to get on this. Well, it's a story that I read on solar. It's the story that I've read about every 5 years on some other technology. The problem is I don't think that they're really taking a close look here at what the implications are and what it's going to take to actually onboard this technology. Yeah, it's a solution, or it's a potential solution, and probably one far more viable than solar has been, just because, or batteries have been, just because of the scale of what it takes to pull that stuff out of the earth to do what you got to do. But the truth is that and outlined here very well in the article, is that it's either water or it's like methane. Those are the two sources of hydrogen here for us.
I think, we've had a lot of conversation about energy. We trade a lot of energy. And I just don't think the answer, if I'm wrong, God bless the world. I just don't think hydrogen is the answer for our energy problems. I think clean nuclear is going to be where we're going to find most of our long-term energy solutions. I hope hydrogen can be that. I mean, solar is a dirty energy. I mean, the amount of pollutants we have to do to mine and refine the batteries and what happens to these solar panels. The world has no clue yet how dirty solar is, and it's a really bad, a very dirty thing. But honestly, it's an easy energy to justify, right? I mean, it's like, hey, the sun, and I mean, it sounds great, but we do not have the technology, at the level it needs to be worth the pollutant that these solar panels are to our environment, or to get the lithium, out of. We can't even manufacture or refine, I should say, the lithium in our country or in North America because it pollutes the environment so bad. We have to ship it to like India. They do it in their side. It travels through the air to our side, and then we ship the battery stuff back. I mean, it's interesting that they're doing this. I think I think we always need to be, and the reason from the investment perspective, like I look at this and you need to say, hey, is this an area I want to invest my money? I think, there's other ways to invest, but this might be a huge game changer. I don't know.
Yeah, what was interesting to me about this article is there's all these other, quasi-viable alternatives to produce electricity that we use in our homes, right? So that's nuclear, that's solar, that's wind. But the one, solar and wind in particular, are weather dependent and intermittent and expensive to produce on the scale that we would need it.
And you're not able to really onboard that on an airplane or a locomotive.
Yeah, well,
transportation
that's where hydrogen's maybe a difference maker, is that in those
right.
heavy industries, right, where you wouldn't be able to make a battery light enough to lift it in an airplane to power the actual airplane.
Right.
The fact that hydrogen can be produced in a liquid form, therefore light enough to be used in some of these environments where a lot of our pollution comes from, these heavy industries, that's maybe a distinct opportunity for hydrogen to play a role in environments where, other things just aren't an appropriate solve. They just won't work.
Right.
Well, that's Money in the News. You're listening to Money on Tap, and you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We'll be right back with risk, reward, and retirement.
For a number of our listeners, they have a lot of questions, and you might be one of them. Today, we're just offering what we call Zoominars, webinars over Zoom meeting rooms, where we have top experts, Social Security, estate planning, and financial planning experts for you to speak with, do a private consultation that way today. We're also having webinar-based Zoominars where we're going to have multiple groups where you can be part of that and enjoy that as well. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com to schedule your Zoominar.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
All right. Welcome back to Listen to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Podcast listeners, make sure to subscribe. Send us a message or a phone call. Either one of those work, and we'll send you out some gear. And just want to thank you and appreciate you for joining us here at Money on Tap. We are talking about the balance of risk and reward for a secure retirement, right? The risk, retirement, reward, all elements that we talk about, and they're very, very important to understand in pulling together a successful retirement experience. And there's lots of ways to do this. If you are right now one of those people that, for instance, are looking kind of on the sidelines of the market and unsure what to do, well, that's a natural response. You're responding to a risk element there, right? You understand that the market can go down. But that's the optics of what you're seeing. Or maybe you've had an experience where, the last year the market went down and you were looking at that money for retirement and it just got too much for you to be able to tolerate. Or maybe you're just on the other side of that. You're just uncertain. You don't know what's going on or how to do this. And you're trying to tune into some, pundits on television, or you're listening here to try to get a little bit better grasp of how to really sort some of these things out for your retirement. Well, this is what we're going to be focused on for you today. Want to try to just really highlight the importance here for you of balancing the risk, right? It's not always hit the accelerator full on, right? When we're driving a car down the road, and I'm thinking of the teaching my 18-year-old to drive. He did a great job, but there was a few of those moments that you're like, hold on. Right? Hold on. we're going. And then it's the opposite. It's like, brake is on. Oh my gosh. Here we go. So how do we create this experience where we have the balance of it? We understand the road. We understand the path. Well, here we go. We're going to have some fun around this, and we're going to talk about time horizon. We're going to talk about cash requirements. We're going to talk about, what we just talked about, the emotional factor here for you. And how does that influence? You know what? Love to hand this off to you, Dan. Why don't you go ahead and help us understand kind of some of these factors affecting your risk profile? If you could pull somebody into a profile for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple key factors you just mentioned there, Seth, or kind of points that we try to evaluate. And the first one is risk tolerance. But to take a quick step back, we got a lot of different tools available to you that can help you get through this process of evaluating your own personal risk tolerance by just answering some simple questions. And what risk tolerance would break down to is, if you were to make a hypothetical investment, after how much loss would you feel compelled to sell and get out? Or after how much gain would you say, well, that's enough, I'm going to stick it in my pocket? And going through a series of questions and kind of exercises about those kind of topics and those considerations, we can actually determine what your overall appetite for risk truly is. And it varies for people. Certainly people are not the same in that way, regardless of how much experience or money you have. Your risk tolerance is more of a psychological, emotional thing. But certainly, if you are more experienced in the market, you might have a little bit more ability to weather those storms simply because you've been there before, as opposed to a new investor. But coming to those conclusions is very important for us. Next would be, things like time horizon, right? And that's fairly straightforward, but as an investor, how much time do you have to leave that money invested, right? So when you begin the investment, when would you want to exit the investment? And it's possible for each separate account you have a different goal in mind. So that's a consideration that isn't necessarily tied to every investment decision you make, or there could be some variance there with specific things in mind. In the basis of the show's retirement, right? So what's your time horizon? Keep this in mind, though. Your time horizon as an investor is not until the day you retire, because you will stay invested through your retirement, right? So understanding that and helping us kind of build investments that fit a lifelong goal of producing income at some point down the road is really important.
When it comes to risk, that's a lot, right? There's a lot to weigh in, and I think, Dan, I appreciate you breaking each one of those pieces down. When people sit down, you guys have it happen all the time. People sit down with us and they say, "Hey, I want to invest this money, but I don't want to lose anything." And you got to back up and you got to say, "Hey, if you want to buy a stock market investment, there's no guarantee that you're not going to lose anything." I mean, if you buy Apple today, it's up 37%. Like, hey, Apple's great. I love my iPhone and I use my iPad and I got my MacBook Pro or whatever. This is a great company. They seem to always be going up, and it's like, no, they go down. And so understanding risk in a way that's quantifiable in someone's mind, I think is really difficult to bridge that gap. I don't know about you guys, but I sit down with people and sometimes I realize that, as I'm talking to them and trying to evaluate their capacity for risk, like to solve their problem, like, some people have to really try to figure out how to stretch beyond their means to try to figure out retirement. And some people, they can work longer, and you say, hey, listen, this is not the right time, based on what you want to accomplish and do. It's in your risk tolerance. It just doesn't work just yet. Work a couple more years. Like, no one wants to hear that, but that could be an honest truth. And then someone says, you know what? I don't want to work a couple more years. What do I need to take out of my plan to make this all work? Or, hey, I'm willing to take the full-on barrel risk. Put me in the market, and let's not look back. I never want to talk about it again. Just buy what we need to buy. But quantifying risk for someone so that they understand what they're buying and doing, for us, we understand it almost like a piece of Jell-O. Like, I can see all the sides of this kind of shaping Jell-O that's constantly moving and reforming itself. But as for someone else, risk is very much in their face, flat, and it's like, that's scary for me. And I think, with the three-dimensional investing that we do, doing the brokerage, the fee-based planning, and the insurance, and bringing all those pieces together, we can really meet people where they're at risk-wise each and every day. I think that's one thing. We can bring guarantees to the table. We can bring the full-on onslaught of the stock market and as far risk as you want to go, and turn the dial up and let's crank the tunes. So having the ability to have that conversation with people, I think, makes it more real for people. Say, no, you don't like this? Let's shift gears over here and downshift to something that's a little bit more comfortable for you. And I think, Dan, when you're talking about risk capacity, that's what we're talking about. Like, what is your ability to absorb risk? And then, how much are you willing to risk doing that? Because some people say, well, is that my whole portfolio? And the truth is, and I'm talking to one gentleman today, and, I keep trying to educate him, and some people are really more difficult to break down these factors for, which is why not everybody's a good client or good potential client. But when trying to understand that your portfolio is not just one asset that we manage at one risk level or in one type of investment is really hard for people, because we use lots of different investments with all sorts of different risks, with all sorts of different time horizons, because you don't need every dollar today, but the dollars you need today need to be low risk, and the dollars you need 20 years from now need to be available 20 years from now, so you can take more risk because you have more time. So I think that's the piece that is really hard for people to quantify, this kind of moving scale, this train. Have you ever been stuck at a train track when there's a long train? It's this constant train of money moving through your life. And, it doesn't all need to be at the front of the train.
Ben, you make a great point. If you're wondering, hey, how do I find out what my risk score is, or, what do I have right now? And how does that align with, my level of risk that I should be taking on or I'm willing to take on? How do all those pieces come together? Guess what? Go to yourmoneyontap.com. That's our website. And there you'll see resources. And under resources, you have free risk analysis. Go ahead and check it out. It's a tool that we have absolutely free to you so that you can understand risk a little differently from this understanding of, hey, I have this emotional reaction to the market. I have the possibility of the unknown happening out here. What happens if and how do I respond there? And then that helps you understand what you have right now. And if the market moves or if something happens, how are you going to respond to that level of risk? Okay. You can go there, yourmoneyontap.com. Again, it is the resources, free risk analysis. Jump on it. Take a minute just to see what's going on with you and your risk profile. We'll be right back.
Ben, how often do we have somebody come into the office and they don't have a financial plan? And how critical is it for us to put the pieces together and make sure that their future, their retirement, is a successful experience? We talk about it all the time here at Money on Tap. If that's you, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Whether you have 100,000, 500,000, 5 million, look, folks, we have the right planner for you. Whether it's Ben or myself, Seth Krussman, we're here for you to get the plan together and make sure that that next step is right.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. So what did you think of our little risk analysis tool there for you? What was your score? Where are you at? How do you respond to different changes in the marketplace? Good questions, right? Things that we all should really have a good understanding of, but pulling together this blend, which it is. It's a blend of our assets that we hold and we use for different periods of our accumulation and distribution and all this retirement stuff. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the current interest rate environment, different stocks, different stock and investment options, and exploring maybe some other areas in real estate or just general investments that you have not covered yet. Ben?
Well, this has been a crazy time. I think if you're, if you're really engaged in the investment world and you understand what's going on, watching the interest rates have the fastest rate hike in history has just sent our world into a massive amount of chaos when it comes to the banking side. But for those people who are retirement investors, this is the greatest thing that's happened in a long time. Separate from the worst thing that's happened, which is the highest inflation. So obviously having these interest rates go up to mitigate better income potential opportunities and lower risk assets, I think that's what's really valuable. For the last decade, I call it the last lost interest rate decade is really what the yield decade has just been gone. For years, we would have conversations with people about bonds. Bonds have been, and we referred to them as the anchor that drags behind the boat that prevents you from making real value. And because, you buy a Pfizer bond or a J&J bond or whatever, and it's paying you 0.5%. And you turn around and you look at the stock and you're like, well, I can get 5 times that in the stock as a yield. And you try to explain to people, well, totally different risks. And it's the same company. And everyone looks at you and says, well, I don't think Johnson & Johnson's going out of business, or I don't think Pfizer. Did you hear about the shot? All the money they made. When you start looking at all of this stuff, you start saying to yourself, well, I don't think these companies have the vulnerability whether you own the stock or the bond. And the truth is that may be true in your mind, but the truth is we don't know anything behind the veil, right? We don't know anything. Look, I think about Enron. Every time I think about these huge companies that people think never will default, Enron is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah. The default here, what are you doing? What's the mental exercise that we're going through? It's called the risk-free rate. And this is where we gravitate towards, that confidence in understanding that no matter what happens, I'm okay. And it's a hypothetical interest rate out there, folks. And it primarily gets tied into government bonds, stable investments. No matter what, you're going to get your money back if you put it in here. Okay. And it's the CD at the bank, under the FDIC insurance and all those kind of factors, right? So if you are investing in that idea, what can you possibly get out of it? And that's your risk-free rate. But what the tendency is to take a look at some of these other options in the investment world and try to balance or try to kind of pull it into that risk-free rate, like that Pfizer, that Johnson & Johnson concept there. It's like we're trying to mitigate some of that risk. And we do that. We try to cover our bases in different ways, ultimately trying to balance the equation for ourselves so that we have the outcomes that we're looking for. But the truth is that there's only very few slim places that you can get this kind of risk-free rate return. And right now, we're experiencing a very different level of return than we have for the last 15 years is what's happened in that marketplace.
Yeah, the U.S. Treasury was considered the risk-free rate, and it's kind of awkwardly timed coming off of all this conversation around the government defaulting a week ago, right? So the risk-free rate right now is about 3.7%. And if you so that's in our business and is generally accepted as that's the rate of return you can presently accept to take on no risk with your investment. Debatable whether the Treasury Department is a place where there is actually built-in risk or not, but from an investment perspective, that's the foundation we use. And as you move up the scale, though, right? So that's what zero risk looks like. What about the banking environment? Is there risk there? Well, we've all seen in the news with the couple of defaults that have occurred. Well, there's increased risk as we move up. And there you're moving up in a 12-month CD, you're looking at 4.8, potentially even 5% if a certain bank's got a special offer. So you can see there by moving only slightly up, or what I would consider to be slightly up the risk scale from the U.S. Treasury to the banking system, you have an increase of about 1 to 1.2% return expectation for taking that small step up, right? So we just really moderately moved up the overall risk scale. And you can begin to understand what that's worth to you, right? It's about a % difference to take that small step.
Yeah. So evaluating your risk-free return and then looking at how much risk you want to step beyond and then evaluating what your potential to make that return is the question, right, guys? That's the piece that everyone's asking. Like, okay, well, I could make XYZ risk-free Treasury. This is great. But I could make this, and I'm willing to take this much risk because it's that potential seems likely, and it's so much higher. So I think that's the piece that drives people a little nuts. For people trying to hit income, it's interesting because there's so many different ways to get versions of truly risk-free return, right? So, the Treasury is obviously the number one, right? That is the ABCs. And then you start going to the banks and you start looking at CDs and you start looking how they're investing. And that's theoretically guaranteed too, but, up to $250,000 per person. And then you start looking at, maybe fixed annuities that have guarantees as well. And those are a little bit higher than CDs, which is a great alternative. If you're really looking to park money for longer periods of time and you just don't want to pay taxes, oh, that's wonderful. And then you start looking at bonds and you start looking at the graduation of bonds, right? So you start looking at maybe municipal bonds and, maybe you don't want to pay taxes, and then you start looking at corporate bonds, and then you start going all the way down to junk bonds, because as you take on more risk, those bonds create more yield. And so then after you cross pretty much a lot of those, that's when you start, engaging in a stock market somewhere between the corporate bond and the junk bond world. You're saying to yourself, stocks might be better than a junk bond because I really want profitable companies that don't have huge risks in the stock side. So, looking at all of that is really interesting. And we talk about this all the time, and we get calls on it, but I'm surprised we don't get more calls on it. But we talk about the demographic change. I talk about it with people all the time. It is literally the focus of conversation. I'm surprised our phone doesn't ring off the hook about the demographic change with the baby boomers. If you don't understand this, or this isn't driving you to call us, it should. But we have 45 million Americans retired out of 320 million. There's another 80 million people going to retire. I mean, that's 35% plus of Americans today being retired, and they're all going to invest differently than they did to make their asset, to make their wealth. Their wealth was created by taking, usually large amounts of risk in, very diversified portfolios with small companies and mid companies, large companies, and they're all entering retirement and they're saying, I want to lower my risk. And you're not alone in that. And demand drives value, right? So if everyone's moving to lower risk assets, what assets are they moving to? And where are they placing their money that's going to push those values up? And how is that going to affect the values of the assets they're leaving? They're potentially going to go down. And so you have to ask yourself, why is my demographic study not in my portfolio today? I mean, I think that's what's going on in my world is, you know, Seth, we talk about this all the time, and we have conversations and no one says, hey, I heard this. This is something different. And how is that producing value in portfolios today?
All great questions. When we're buying that idea inside the stock market, right, that dividend paying idea, there is another element of risk. And that's, again, we're going to say it's the market. We're looking for interest. We're looking for that payment. We're looking for income. Well, it's not the riskiest that you can get, but it's about as risky as you can get inside of that idea.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have no recourse as just a stock owner if something happens to the company. Now, we talk about big companies, large cap. There's probably very little risk that those companies like Pfizer or Johnson, whatever, they're mega caps. There's very little risk that those companies are going to be going out of business. However, they have the ability to change that payout for you. Okay? But if they do go out of business, you have no recourse. And there's other ways to buy companies like the corporate bond or the there's just several different options. Preferreds or another, drawing a blank here, but preferreds are another option. So if something happens to that company, you're at least on the list of getting paid out. Okay, we're not going to get into that, but there's ways to go ahead and to layer that risk inside of owning companies as well. So that's something to consider. And even then, there's other options as far as buying companies or lending companies and becoming stepping up on the ladder of liquidity if something happens to that company, and becoming basically a lien holder inside of that company so that you're collecting payments from them if you're lending money to them. Those kind of ideas exist as well. So as we move through this path of understanding the yield curve and risk-free rate of return and start getting into these dividend ideas, we start exploring some other ideas in terms of real estate. Why would we be interested in real estate? Dan?
Well, I think for two reasons. One, it's not correlated to the market itself, right? So there's the valuation anybody can place on the merits of any individual company, but when you do that, you need to understand the fact that that company is part of a sector. It's part of the market as a whole. And turbulence that hits the market in general can affect stocks of companies, even if the company's itself performing very well. You know, but this market effect can drag it down. So there is a notion of, well, I need to diversify my investments. I've come to the conclusion of what my risk score looks like, but I want to bring in some diversity there. And real estate is a very common go-to there. And so REITs open up a different opportunity in that they're not related to the market, but that they do have the ability to, similarly like a stock, both appreciate in value and pay a yield. Now, REITs are considered, you know, as an asset class, a little bit more risky than a stock. So you would expect to get, in this analysis, a little bit more return. So what we've done here is taken a look at a number of kind of the higher yielding publicly traded REITs that are out there. And as expected they're paying, you know, on par, very comparable to some of the, you know, better rated dividend paying stock companies out there. You know, you can get yield off of REITs, you know, in the neighborhood of anywhere from, you know, 4.9 up to, you know, 10 or 11%. So as expected, you would say, well, as the yield goes up, there's probably an increased risk factor, which each of those separate considerations. But real estate is something that, you know, is part of virtually everybody's portfolio, or should be a consideration there, primarily because of the fact that it's not correlated.
Yeah, I like having a little bit of real estate in people's portfolio, especially people who don't manage their own real estate. You know, if you have real estate, you have your own kind of real estate portfolio, you own some commercial buildings or, you know, multifamily or something like that, that may not be, you may not want to be so heavily real estate weighted, right? You want to probably watch out for that. And that's a whole nother risk assessment piece. So, yeah, I mean, I like REITs generally. I think they've been oversold recently. I mean, that's my general thinking for a long-term period, but there's a lot of expectation that we're going to have this recession and that real estate's going to go vacant and things are going to happen, which is why, stocks go down for a reason. So if a stock is down, you have to ask yourself, I was thinking about dividends and so forth, like 3M. 3M is an interesting company. It's at a 5-year low roughly, and it's paying a 6% dividend. You have to ask yourself, well, why is a company that has been around for so long, it's been paying a dividend for 64 years. It has 64 years of growth in that dividend. It beats every sector. It's an aristocrat. Like, this is a big company name. Well, they're dealing with lawsuits, and people don't know what that's going to entail. And so there's lots of questions about that. Well, I think one was resolved and another one they're still working on. And there's things going on with these companies that you have to ask yourself, hey, what's driving that? And do I think that this is a opportunity to get in, or is this a time to buyer beware? And lots of people don't think about that. But when you talk about these dividend aristocrats and these companies who pay and pay and pay, they've always paid, there's a point in time where they stop paying sometimes. And I wouldn't want to be the CEO of that company at that day and time, but but those are interesting conversations to have, because you really have to know what you're buying.
You're listening to Money on Tap, and if you're wondering about this risk question that we've got, we do have tools for you. We've got lots of tools available, and they are free of charge to you, my friend. You can go to yourmoneyontap.com. Once you're there, I want you to head over to resources and head down to free risk analysis. Go ahead. It's a short little quiz, and you'll get a number, and that number will then help you to understand, how do you relate with risk? It's a personal thing. Everybody's a little different. Okay. And then you can take what you have in your investment world, or if you're new to investing, you can start to understand how to invest moving forward, how to take that step so that you're in the right place. And all these things are coming together so that you can have this successful experience in investing. We talk about that a lot here in Money on Tap, being successful in investing. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
And now, here's our Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap.
Thinking back about the volume of savings that was going on during COVID and how that was just astronomical, like record numbers of savings. People weren't spending money. But now people have gone completely the opposite direction. I'd be curious to know what the savings numbers are. But I think this really brings to awareness the idea that if you're struggling with this, give us a call. I've talked to people, we've counseled people, we've patted people on the back through tears of being overwhelmed with debt. It's like a noose around your neck. People really struggle with this, and it's something that you feel like it's never too late to turn things around. And that's really important for our listeners to know, that we're all about good finances.
Thanks for joining us for this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, with great tips from the pros in three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. Now here's more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Podcast subscribers, make sure that you give us a call or send us a message. We've got something for you just to thank you for being here with us. You could spend your time many different ways, and we just appreciate that you're here with us. This show is one that we find really valuable. We love all of our shows, right? We don't just produce content over here for the heck of it. We really enjoy and appreciate what it is that we're doing for you and think it's valuable. And some of these shows we just think are ones that are go-tos, that are just kind of stalwarts. We come back to, we're like, you've got to get this and understand this, because everything comes through this lens. We want you to be successful. We want you to retire well. And these are key components for you to be able to create retirement, to have retirement, and to invest successfully. So we've given you a tool. Go get it. Go do it. And when you do, you're going to get a number. We're going to talk a little bit right now, kind of more around this relationship of what it is that the tool is providing us and you, primarily you, and helping us as advisors to come alongside you and really give you the best advice we possibly can to help streamline this path for you. Take off of your shoulders some of that stress and some of that concern and those questions and the worry that you have there. Or, there's plenty of you too that are like, hey, you know what? I'm retiring, but I'm not ready to give up. There's that other side that's the other investor as well. I've got enough. I've made enough. Let's protect that. But the other stuff that I have, I really want to have a legacy with, other components inside of my retirement. Well, this allows us that lens to be able to work from. Dan?
Yeah, for people who, also, I just really feel like we got to make this offer as well, kind of piggybacking off of that. If doing it online yourself is something that seems daunting or it just isn't what you're into, we do have an alternative, right? So if you send us an email or give us a call, we can send you out our financial questionnaire, right? Totally confidential. You provide us the information as you see it relative to your goals and expectations as you plan for retirement. Attach to it statements that you'd like to have us evaluate, whether it's your 401k or outside investment accounts. If you return that information to us, we can run it through the same system, right? So we can evaluate what your risk tolerance is and what your actual portfolio looks like on a risk score basis. And then we can get back together and have a conversation around, potentially suggested tweaks or things like that. But there's no obligation on your end, no cost on your end to engage us on that level and have that kind of first round conversation. So if you prefer that rather than doing it yourself, or if you take the time to do it yourself and what you see surprises you in some way or creates some level of concern, you want to take that next step and kind of dive down a little further, we can go through that same exact process with you as well. We'll have a two-way conversation. We'll have information in hand, and we'll have a better idea of what your ideal retirement looks like, or whatever the financial adventure you're on is. How do we help you meet this specific goal? It doesn't have to be retirement. It can be other considerations as well. But we're more than happy to have that consultation with you and kind of give you the guided tour of the software and how we interpret the results you're seeing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really put in their perspective of when they own assets like, hey, I have this stock and that's a risk tolerance of 100. And I have this cash in my bank account and that's risk score of 1. And so when they don't quantify those things that they average out to a 50, right? Like we have the ability to weight each one of those assets in what they score and figure out what that median range is and then get you tested with some simple questions really to bring it into line. So, I got to tell you, it's more like people take the test and they're a 30 risk score and they put their assets in and they're an 80 risk score. And people are like, oh no, what do I do? I had no idea I was holding this much risk. And it's just really, really interesting, specifically when you put some of these target date funds in. When you put some of these target date funds in, and you're shocked at how much risk you're really potentially taking.
If you're wondering, is mostly what every 401k person that is involved in a 401k has, because they just haven't selected other funds or they really don't understand what is the risk that they're taking. Most everybody in the 401ks are doing this. If you take a look across the board, that's just the way the numbers work. Makes sense that if that's you want to start to take a look at how do I start to really diversify myself? How do I start to invest in some different places that are going to ultimately guarantee my ability to retire? Okay, we haven't made a recommendation on what that is here, but that's the goal that we usually start out from. Where do we want to start for you? We want to have the conversation or put into place a plan that allows you to retire and retire successfully, right? And that's one of the first things we want to, our goals or objectives are as financial planners here, or for you here at Money on Tap. What is it going to take? Well, you're going to have to start to answer some questions. How do you feel about this? How is this experience going so far? Do you have complete and total faith and knowledge of what's going to happen down the road with that Social Security or with the investments that you have right now? Is there a blind spot? Is there a question mark over here, or something that you just haven't even considered? We get to do that with you, or whoever's in the fold with you. That's one of the things that we hope is an opportunity for you here with Money on Tap and Brayshaw Financial Group. You guys, this has been a fantastic show. Is there anything that we've missed or something that you really feel that's important to kind of leave people here with today?
I welcome people the chance to take that opportunity to run through the software and really see where you're at.
I think risk and reward, are a big part of people's lives. but retirement's the new focus, and that the evaluation of what risk and reward look like is just different now.
Amen to that. Be successful in your investing. Be successful in your retirement. Look forward to talking to you. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.